Good morning, everyone, and how are you doing? I hate the dinging sound. Well, behind me you see a nice Hyundai. We actually just did one of these in the last show. It was the last car of the day. I don't even know if we finished the show on that one.
Well, the last one, that was a single din.
Well, we did a double din in this one. Let me show you what it looks like, because we didn't film it. I mean, we just did one of these, and they're kind of anticlimactic. So we went ahead and put the DPX302U Kenwood CD player with USB and auxiliary. We can change the screen to green to match all his buttons. That's pretty much all the excitement for this one. But we have another car waiting that is going to be a lot more interesting for us anyway. So Fernando's going to go get that one. So, next car up is an Audi A4. What it's in for is some new speakers. They're going to do some R-types in the doors. What we want to check for, first off, is what signals are coming out of the tweeters here in the dash, these guys, and the mid-range in the door. We want to see if they're on the same channel or if it's an actively crossed over signal coming from some form of amplifier processor or something like that. So we have our dual RTA setup. Let's go ahead and get into the car and see what it's doing. So we have the door off and we have our RTA plugged into the speaker output here, as well as right here in the dash. Now the tweeter does have a cap on it, which is making me think that these two speakers are probably connected and that it's a single channel powering both. But to be sure, what we want to do is we have both RTAs here. We're gonna run some pink noise from the radio into these and see what it looks like. So what we just saw is that the RTA is getting the same signal on both the outputs. We know that whatever's feeding it is coming from the same source. I mean, there's obviously some form of active crossover blocking the bass from getting to the door speakers. It does have a factory sub. We've already actually tested the subwoofer to see if there's any ANC or fake engine noise or any noise cancel or anything like that, because we've had this in before. For that, we just needed to find this out. Now what we need to do is, because he's actually going to hook this up to an LC7i, he just wants us to make the cool door pods and stuff like that and figure out what the heck is going on in the car. So now we're going to pull the glove box and see if it's coming directly out of this guy here, or if there's an amplifier hidden somewhere that's powering these door speakers. Alright, so we have the factory radio down, and this particular A4 does not have an amplifier. What we have is just cool 8 speaker wires here, left, front, right, rear, the whole, the standard 8. It also, the factory subwoofer is also powered from the radio here too, so that's kind of cool if you guys are looking to do a cool 5-channel integration here. The plan is this: they conveniently put both the tweeter and the mid-range wire into the same pin. So we actually have 4 wires and 2 outlets, both front and rear. So the tweeter is here, the mid-range is here, tweeter here, mid-range here, all into the same plug. So what we're going to do is, unfortunately we don't have a T-harness for this, which is really kind of a bummer. I'm sure they probably make one, we just didn't have enough headroom to get one in. So the plan is we're gonna cut it up here, somewhere up here, so we have plenty of wire if we need to reattach it. And we have a left and right wire that we ran. This is just a twisted pair here that we have, white, gray. We're going to connect it to the output of the radio. And then what we have here is we have our passenger side mid-range tweeter, driver's side mid-range tweeter that are going to get hooked up to these wires here. What we're going to try to do is put male and female connectors here so that if he ever does need to unplug this for whatever reason, he can and just plug it back in instead of having to cut a bunch of wires and solder stuff up, because he's had one of these before and he ran into some problems, so he would like it to be able to go back together on a Sunday if he needed it to. So let's get started doing that. And we've made plugs so that everything will plug back into factory if he needs it to. We added in different colors, so like the yellow here is for the tweeters, the standard red is for the mid bass, and then we added that on both front and rear, and we added colors to the inputs going in. These are obviously the tweeter wires that we're not going to need to hook up because they're in parallel here coming out. We only need one set of these going back to the amplifier, but everything else is all matched up, so if he does need to take it apart, it will just plug back in. Real easy to go there. All right, so here's the tweeter pod here. Looks like we're gonna just make this out of some 1/8 inch. And then this guy, this is gonna have to be really thick. We're gonna start out with a 1/2 inch base because really the only part of the door panel that's touching this is this front gasket here. We are gonna do fast rings. The plan is we'll start with a 1/2 inch base, maybe do a 1/2 inch spacer just to get it out into, we have to see how much of this needs to stay away from the inside of the door. But first thing is to get this shape right here made. So we're gonna head over to the router, cut a piece, mount this to it, see how it goes. So we have our basic template here now. We had to go ahead and cut a hole in the center here because we needed room for that magnet to go through so that it would ride the bearing. We don't want to have this thing sticking way up and out of here. We also put some 1/2 inch spacers so that it sat flush with this. Now we have our basic shape. We went ahead and drilled our holes so they'll match up to the factory holes. We have this little nipple right here that we can use to line up. This guy has this nipple right here. So now what we want to do is stack these on top of our 2 other cut pieces and router 2 of these guys out. So we have our 2 basic pods made. Go ahead and label this so we'll have it for the next time. Now what we want to do is get our Type R speakers, figure out how big of a circle we need to make in the center of this, see how deep, how far out these need to be. What we have is the speaker actually fits almost all the way into the door before it hits the window brace. If it's touching the window brace, it is about a 1/2 inch all the way around, which is about the thickness of this baffle. But we have tons of room that we can space this thing out into the door. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna add a set of these. These are the BK SG650DX. This is a Best Kits universal 1/2 inch spacer. So we can attach this onto here like this, and that'll bring us a full 1 inch out of the door. Now the cool thing is if we wanted, these are actually a tongue and groove fit. So you can actually stack them. So if we wanna go a full 1 inch, this is a nice thick, you know, it's a 1/2 inch thick, like thick this way. It's not cheap, it's double-sided. There's on both sides, and we can make a full 1 inch spacer. This would be 1.5 inches, which would be a little bit almost too much. So we're just gonna do a single. But that's the nice thing about these is that you can stack them and they lock together and they actually hold. So like I'm holding it from the front and it's sticking together. So pretty cool there. So what we're gonna do now is we're just gonna line it up, find our X point center. We're gonna router out a hole in the center here, attach these to it, get it into the car. All right, so now we're gonna go ahead and router these out, and then we'll come back and we'll glue them on so that they're nice and secure. All right, so we have our 2 spacers made and ready to go. Now all we need to do is foam the back of this, foam the back of this, put these guys in like this, drill a hole for the wire to come out, get them into the car. All right, so now that we have the foam on here, we went ahead and drilled a hole similar to where factory wire would have come out. There's a little tiny nipple here. So we went here, drilled our hole for the wire to come out, and we dug a groove here because this is actually metal. So this will now come through here like this and sit in there. And we marked top up here so that we can have our terminals facing down. It's gonna look just like that. Now what we wanna start on is the tweeter pod. All right, so for spacers, just using a little 1/2 inch spacer. And what this is this is the silver piece that comes out. This is the 8-gauge downsizer out of a fuse holder. We save all these for some silly reason, mainly for amplifier spacers, but they're also the exact same height that we need to space like this tweeter and that mid-range up, so we don't have to hack this guy up. We can give him back all his speakers. He can put them back in if he decides he wants to at a later date. All right, so this is all in nice and tight. Let's take it over to the router. All right, so we have our template made for our tweeter. We've gone ahead and stacked 2 1/8 inch. We're gonna go ahead and mount this guy on here with some tape and router it out. All right, so the factory tweeter is actually off to one side. It's not centered over the grill, so we want to make sure that we copy that. Looking at the factory grill, as you can see, it's off to one side also. I'm guessing that this is going to sit underneath it, something like that. So we want to just make sure that we mount it the same way. That way we're not putting the tweeter here where it would be totally useless. So something to consider when you're doing these, that you need to check this too. Alright, so we're gonna go ahead and test fit it in there and see how it looks. Alright, so it fits perfect as far as lines up good. The only problem is that this is a little too thick because it's hitting the side when it goes in and pushing the tweeter a little bit more forward. So what we're gonna do is just grind this off so it'll fit in there nice and snug. Alright, so there we go. We have the tweeter mounted. Like I said, we just filed that little guy away there. Now all we need to do, it comes with these guys right here. These are the passive crossovers for it. So we're gonna go ahead and hook these up and get it into the dash. All right, so this is what this guy looks like with a fast ring. How exciting. So we have the LC7i here. We have our left and right speaker wires hooked into it. This is like a combination of, like, we put this in here and then he's doing everything else after that. What we had done last time is we just hooked up the factory subwoofer input into channels 3. To use the GTO circuit, which is the great turn on, you have to have a signal coming into channels main, or channel 1 and 2, depending on how you want to look at that. So to do that, what you typically do is, if, like for this case, all he was doing was sub, he could have gotten away with LC2i, but he wanted to do highs, so he bought the LC7i knowing that eventually it was going to get hooked up that way. So what you have to do is you have to run a jumper from channel 3 into the main so that it's the signal coming into it, and then the GTO will turn on. So now that we have an actual front input, we're gonna go ahead and remove that jumper, put this on, and now it'll work the same way, but it'll work the way it's supposed to. So for those of you guys that for some reason aren't familiar with the PDX V9, which if you're watching the show, I'm sure you're well aware of what a PDX V9 is. They have these cool plugs, so we were able to go ahead and attach them. When you're doing it, it's nice, like, so you can see they're in length, so you have little short, taller, and they go up in increments so that as you're plugging it in, they go in a nice equal row. And of course we label them too, so it says like 1, 2, 3, 4. So now we're just gonna go ahead and get these things plugged in, pull the back off, and adjust the crossover a little bit. All right, so like I said, this is a joint effort. We're just doing some of the harder stuff. He really likes to do installation, stuff like this. He doesn't want to play with, but like this stuff, he likes doing that. You know, he just wants us to get it hooked up, and he's gonna pull most of it back apart and rerun his wires and do tape and all that fun stuff. So it's fun for him, so rock on. On this amplifier, channels 1 and 2 right here, you have a 1 and ×10 high pass switch. And the reason why is so you can actually use it for tweeters. So like it says 30 to 600. So that would be 300 to 6,000. So next up is this cool switch here. This is your input selector, 1, 2, 3, 4 for channels 3 and 4. For this, we're just running a left and right input. So we're gonna put this channels 3 and 4 input to 1 and 2. That way, all we have to do is plug in RCA 1 and RCA 2, and that will feed all 4 of the channels. On the channels 3 and 4, you have 2 options for the high pass. You have high pass or band pass. If you set it for high pass, it'll set the bottom, meaning the lowest frequency that it'll play. If you set it for band pass, what it'll do is it'll still play the lowest frequency you want it to play, but then it'll just cross over the top of the mid-range at whatever this frequency is. You'll have that nice crossover point right there at this center frequency. And of course the subwoofer is set up the same. You have gain, subsonic filter, low pass, and your choice of inputs. In this case, we're using sub because it has a sub input. Now, no amplifier is perfect at all, ever. Doesn't matter how cool they are. There's no such thing as a perfect amplifier. There's amplifiers that are really, really close, but then there's always that one thing. And for me, on these PDX V9s, the one thing that gets me every time is they don't have a bass boost. It's just a pet peeve. I wish they did, because every now and then bass boost helps. We don't need it for this, thankfully, because we have the LC7i that has AccuBass, which in this case, this has no bass roll off, so we can actually use it as a bass boost. So we're golden there. When you are doing these installs where you're connecting them to a factory deck, if you don't have some form of EQ, or like an LC7i that has some form of a bass boost built into it, sometimes the bass can sound kind of flat. So it's nice to have that. All right, we're almost done. All right, so Fernando's just finishing putting the glove box into this. We did a little bit of gain overlap on the PDX V9 so that channels 3 and 4 were up a little bit higher than channels 1 and 2 because 1 and 2 were the tweeters and they're in your face. So those are all the way down. We're at about 9 o'clock for the mid bass in the doors. 80 hertz is where we're running them. They sound really good there. As far as the top of the mid bass, the R types have a top already built into them, so we're just running them actual high pass. At this point, we've listened to it, we're good, it's dialed in as good as he likes to play with it too, so you know, we've got it. Our part of the install is pretty much done. So now we're gonna get this out of here because we have more cars to do. Next on the list, this little 3 Series BMW. Say hi, Fernando.
Hi, Fernando.
So what we're doing on this is a radio swap. Apparently he just wants a new radio, so that's good. So we're just gonna go ahead and take the one he's got. He's not even getting Bluetooth, bonus. Because we need to get this one done pretty quick. Paul didn't really schedule, he didn't know what was going on in the Audi, so he didn't book accordingly. It happens. But let's get to this. All right, so to start on these, you're gonna pull this guy off first, then this guy. So what you wanna do is start over there above the glove box and just kind of start prying it this way. There's like 4 large metal spikes that go into these metal clips in the dash. See, as you can see, it's got these spikes right here that go into those orange things, and they're long, so they don't like to come out. Now this side is just gonna pop off here, and then there's one more spike on this side. That's it. Now for this one, the radio isn't working, so what we want to do is figure out why the radio is not working first. So we're not going to unplug it. Go ahead and remove the air conditioning controls. All right, we have constant 12 volts. Right. Yeah, we got power. Yeah, it's got power. The radio must be bad. Okay. Okay, so it is the radio that is bad. So we have accessory, we have power, we have ground. So we have the 3 things we're looking for in a radio. This just isn't working. So we'll go ahead and pull up on this guy here. That'll come out. Now what we need to do is pull this screw, this screw, this screw, and this screw. We need to get this whole apparatus out of here because we need to trim it up so we can fit our aftermarket radio in. Now, the trick is getting this thing out. Okay, these overlap this, but this really is a pain to get out. If you're careful, you can slide this down to get this out. All right. All right, so we now got this out. This is what we needed. We have to remove some of the stuff here. Gonna go ahead and get the harness made up. We don't have a Bluetooth mic to put in. So let's go over to the table and I'll show you how to modify this. We're gonna need the radio, the cage, obviously the faceplate. We don't need this. What we need to do first though is remove this piece right here, this. So go ahead and cut it here, cut it here. And of course our 3-inch sander makes quick work of it. Now what we want to do is slide this guy into here. If we just leave it like this, it's going to push in on this side, just like that. So what we want to do now is we want to cut a piece of plastic that fits right here. So we want 1 1¼ by 2 1/8. All right, so as you can see, what we did is we just basically created this ledge here that's not there. It just wedges into place. So now this cage has something to rest up against. We want to make sure we push it all that way. Now what we can do is we can cut a piece to go right here to make sure that that stays pushed that way. So that's going to be 1 7/8, about 7/8. All right, so now we've made the shim. These are right where they need to be. Now go ahead and take your dash kit, fit it over the front of the radio like so. And these 2 screws that were holding it in, you want to go ahead and put those back in. They don't need to go in once it's in the car. They can go in right now. And there you go. You have a nice, secure, believe it or not, mount. Now if you're extra cautious and you're worried about something like this pulling out, there's a screw hole here. If you want to make a trim panel to go here, you can put a screw right there and that'll also hold it in, but this isn't going anywhere. Now the last step we want to do is to make it go in easier than we did. What we want to do is go ahead and cut these guys, shave them down right across here so that it just fits into the dash a little bit easier. Let's go ahead and get this into the car, get it all plugged up, get this thing out of here. Perfect. So in this case, he just had a bad stereo. We put a new Pioneer in and out real quick. On to the next one.